So we're just going to talk about the EU Digital Omnibus. Just before we do, we've got two free tools that we've released. One is a Chrome extension. So that's the Consent Mode Monitor Chrome extension, which lets you do like a free sort of scan of any website. It's a bit like Built With or Ghostly, but it just checks the GTM settings for consent. The reason we introduced the Chrome extension is that sometimes the manual scanner gets blocked by Cloudflare and whatnot. So if this one basically gets the GTM account ID from the browser and then runs the scan. Just a quick legal disclaimer: I'm not a lawyer, so anything in here, please take with a pinch of salt. So what is the Omnibus? So it's simplifying GDPR, e-privacy, and the AI Act. It also is designed to reduce that compliance burden, especially for smaller companies. So in essence, basically, there's harmonization around GDPR, e-privacy, AI Act, etc. So that's really what the Digital Omnibus is trying to do: simplify into one big kind of package rather than lots of other sort of smaller ones. Proposal stage in November. There's quite a few non-profits that have done some really good analysis of the amendments. And as I said, it's again, at least a year away for adoption. There may also be a staggered approach for some of the cookie requirements and browser signals because it takes time for browsers to push out updates, test them, etc. And also it takes time for CMPs to update as well. Some of these changes, so it's likely there's going to be a kind of accept or reject, so not so many options. Because and also that will help standardize with kind of dark patterns because the browser then they're going to decide what the buttons look like, not like the CMPs. So it's possible that all these kind of the sort of banner blindness problem or cookie fatigue may standardize into one standard kind of opt-in, opt-out, or accept, reject. Very similar to what happens on iOS, where you have a standardized kind of button for particular things. There are actually on web, there are some existing frameworks which are standardized. So here we've got a navigator, HTML5 attribute for geolocation, where it's like accept or block. Basically, it's the same kind of everywhere in terms of the look and feel. Similar for HTML5 push notifications, where you get a block or allow. So this is the browser kind of doing the work, deciding on the design and the buttons, not the CMP. So that's what I'm expecting, something like that for these proposals, although as far as I'm aware, I've not seen a kind of working model of an update to WebKit to see what this actual kind of consent banner may or may not look like. So these are just examples of what currently exists, which is the kind of closest thing to it. So as I said, this is not something you need to worry about now. It's more like 12, 24 month kind of window. And it's but the impact to CMPs is potentially quite significant because they're going to need to more like still listen for signals, but it's not a signal coming from a cookie; it's be coming from the browser. And then interpreting and deciding what to do with that signal. There are a couple of specific use cases, though, where CMPs may need to adjust kind of what they do. So you've still got potentially a hybrid situation where you're going to have cookies and a browser signal. There's a question of which one takes precedence there, and also these proposals at the moment, it's not clear if they've got like second layers or more granular control. How is that going to work? What's going to happen with sites that need very specific instances, like publishers, for example, or TCF? And then the other one. There's talk of a media exemption, a little bit similar to sort of consent or pay, where the publishers can kind of push or sort of overwrite sort of a consent. So the other thing that's mentioned here, personal data, the definition of it is potentially kind of going to change. So it's currently what can you reasonably identify? Can you reasonably identify a person? Changing to can the data controller reasonably identify? What does that mean in reality? It means what does a cookie ID mean to you? So if a cookie ID is just anonymous, you're okay, potentially. But if you can link that with other data, potentially transaction ID, user ID, email hash, that sort of thing, and identify that person, then it potentially might become personal data. So the context of what personal data means may change depending on this kind of linkage kind of piece. So on that note, in under GDPR, with things like GA4 deny pings, that's currently been used as sort of a workaround for not storing cookies on a terminal, like on a user's device. So the existing kind of workarounds were there for under GDPR, and sort of relaying parameters in the URL, not storing it. It's possible that there may be other kind of workarounds to sort of or grey areas to what is identifiable or not. It really needs kind of clear examples. The other one that's a real kind of question mark is GCL IDs. A Google Click ID, it's not necessarily it's more identifying a click, but the click could be used to identify the user. Is that allowed or not allowed? And also the linkage on that is linking to pull in cost data, which is needed for brands to be able to kind of work out, is there marketing or working or not working? It's the classic kind of which 50% of my marketing is working or not. So that is a big kind of grey area. Same also happens in California, where there's a question. They say that you can get away with adding GA4 if you don't kind of link to Google Ads, not just remarketing linking, but cost data linking. The problem is it greatly reduces the value you get from an analytics tool if you can't run kind of ROAS or CPA reports, and you need the cost but data bit and the conversions bit to be able to kind of run those equations. So that's a big kind of unknown piece that I'm sort of seeking clarity on myself. The other one on this linkage bit is there's other systems involved. It's not just the website, not just the CMP. We've also got CRM systems, so like HubSpot, Salesforce, etc. E-commerce systems, so your kind of Shopify, Magento, and then obviously like third-party like CDPs as an example, so Klaviyo, etc. So it's that linkage bit, which potentially from those, which is going to allow that data to be identifiable, and then it becomes personal. The good news is there's an AI kind of loophole. So if the data is potentially used for training, then you may be able to kind of sort of store it. The only slight problem is that it's not clear at the moment. There's not a do not train signal. And so, for instance, at the moment, most CMPs don't have an option saying, do you allow your data to be used for training? The closest two things that exist that are there for it is add underscore personalization, which is part of a Google consent mode, which can be repurposed for do not train, or that some of the vendors themselves have a setting in the tool. So ChatGPT and LinkedIn both have a do not train opt out actually when you're logged into the tool. But again, not a clear way to send a user signal to say, don't use my data for training. And also, it's quite important to determine what that signal is, because removing user data historically is very difficult on these large language models. So I think that needs a bit of clarity. So the sensitive fields are still remain though, and the important just a note on these ones, a field can be inferred to be sensitive. A good example of that is health conditions, which could be inferred from someone's search or inferred from, let's just say, Healthline example, where people viewed a page about a medical condition and were active for long enough on that page, and thus it was could be inferred that they had a medical condition. So just like those are a kind of area for extra kind of carefulness. So the key point is that so analytics potentially can be allowed by default, so not needing consent as part of these requirements. However, there's 6 extra pieces to allow analytics to be kind of on by default, and or only be using an opt-out model. So clear opt-out, that's obviously an easy one. Similar to kind of US laws, which are opt-out mode. Data is aggregated, so GA4 generally is aggregated. Maybe the Explorer reports might need to be somehow hidden, but and also it's used for single purpose. So we normally recommend setting up GA4 in analytics only mode, and then using the Google Ads remarketing pixels for both remarketing and sort of conversions. So try and limit the scope of analytics to single purpose mode, not analytics plus remarketing. And then used only for internal statistics or basic analytics purpose only, so not used for potentially functional or obviously remarketing. Now the two extra ones down here are a bit more of a problem. So data processing on your own infrastructure. So it's not just kind of hosting the BigQuery data on an account you control. It's also the kind of that data collection piece as well. And then also no transfer to external data processors. So doing these last two on GA4 is potentially a bit of a problem. So here's GA4 on the left, and then Piwik Matomo on the right. So this data ownership is a problem. A kind of shared cloud or lack of private cloud is also a problem. And then processing in USA is also not a problem. And then the fact that it's owned by an ad network is obviously not ideal. So and as I said, similar problems exist for HIPAA. So it may be that this proposals in 12 24 months may accelerate the usage of kind of additional analytics tools and kind of dual tracking. So people running J4 and Piwik or similar, so that they have extra kind of data for that 12-month kind of lead time before there's a potential kind of change. Now there could be a last minute change and some sort of agreement done, or Google introduce some ways of doing self-hosting for J4 or like kind of almost like an on-premise or Urchin style kind of mode, but that doesn't exist at the moment. But that would be my hope. Okay, and the other changes that are being standardized. So incident reporting, so breach notification is being standardized. Time periods for breach notification. The template for data protection impact assessment is also being standardized to one form, not multiples. So that's a good thing. And the list of providers to send that to is also being standardized. And then subject access requests also are being standardized, and also potentially the ability to refuse or charge for subject access requests if they're clearly abusive. So the other change, more flexible AI implementations. So the rules for SMEs are being simplified. So attribution is going to get a bit harder, unfortunately, because of these linkage, which basically need to be unlinked for instance, cost data and user ID, etc. So sessionization is not going to be as easy. Personalization will shift to zero party. Okay, so opt-in for first-party data becomes more important for vouchers and affiliates, etc. The 6-month cookie duration is a really strange piece within the proposal. As I said, normally it's 12 months from kind of last interaction. I don't quite know why they shortened the period. Bear in mind, the aim is to reduce cookie fatigue. So why would you want to have to keep asking people every 6 months? The other point, which I'm not clear about yet, is CMPs track opt-in and opt-out, and you kind of get a report of what's your opt-out rate. If it does shift to the browser, there's not actually going to be a means to count the number of opt-outs. So actually then modeling or similar to that becomes more difficult. Obviously, if you don't need modeling and you can get away with not using linkage, then that's okay. But for targeting tags like Google Ads conversion pixel, which you're going to need to get consent for, how does modeling work in that environment where you don't have denied pixels is an interesting kind of question. It may be the 6-month logic changes to 12 months, which would make sense. Again, California is 12 months. Why would they want to change it to 6 months? It's a bit nuts. The browser consent could fundamentally change user flows. Again, reduced cookie fatigue, banner blindness. But yeah, it's not clear how that's going to look, how many options there's going to be on it. And we don't yet have anything visual to see from it. And also whether it's going to cause affiliates to sort of change their business model and voucher code sites, etc. It's unlikely we're going to have a bunch of individual purposes like this. I think that's kind of too much control. That kind of defies the point of simplifying. But it may be there's some additional settings in the browser which are more granular. I just want to just mention this point. Actually, this is an important one. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm seeing that ad personalization field be used for the kind of do not train. However, there's a massive problem with ad personalization, which is the CMP's bundle consent. So when you click allow on a sort of targeting category, and most CMPs will automatically send a granted for ad user data and ad personalization. They don't do granular consent, as is kind of identified with the Intersports kind of loyalty program. So it is in some CMPs, it's possible to expose that, but most don't. So it then creates a problem. How do you unbundle uh, a targeting flag or signal where you've kind of sent it with one granted for targeting, but not necessarily per individual purposes for that type of targeting, i.e. email hash and training or ad personalization. So I personally think the only way around that is to create a brand new field, be it AI modeling, and split out the field. But again, then there's going to be need to ask an additional question, which makes it more complicated. And at the moment, similar to the old do not track or AK do not target kind of model or DNT, which has become kind of GCP, it only asks one question when really it's two questions that need to be asked. So this is a huge problem. I don't see an easy solution to it yet, but it may be the browsers can figure that out with more granular settings. And the other slight issue on this, on GTM server side, most plugins or kind of tags in server side only read the G100, G11, etc. fields. They don't read consent mode v2, which has these additional fields within it. There's a secondary problem about Google standardizing GTM server side for reading default consent. So, for instance, a lot of the state plugins only read Google Consent Mode v1. They ignore these additional fields within Consent Mode v2. Basically, the good news is cost of CMPs will reduce. Bad news is people are going to need to, or brands are going to need to pay for a hosted analytics provider and plan for that in at least 12 months' time. For the hosted analytics, good news is that if you don't use linking, you can use modeling. You don't need an opt-in, although you do still need an opt-out potentially. The cost data, obviously, and user ID sessionization, potentially you can't do that as part of Omnibus. EU and US harmonization. So EU in essence is becoming less strict, US becoming more strict, as in the US you only really need to worry about targeting cookies, not so much analytics cookies, and EU is kind of moving in that same direction. And also given that the EU has a EU has a requirement for a global privacy control, which the browsers need to add within the next 12 months. So that kind of ties in with this kind of also browser-based change that the EU is also proposing.